everyone, and welcome to the very first official episode of Mind Your Mission. I'm Erin.
And I'm Liz.
And we're here to have real, honest conversations about what it looks like for us to step into our calling as women and live out God's design for our lives. If you missed our introduction episode, I will put the link in the description of this episode so you can go check it out. It's a few minutes long, and it shares our heart behind starting this podcast. On today's episode, we thought it would be great to introduce ourselves and share a bit about the journey that brought us to starting this podcast. Liz will be sharing part of her testimony in today's episode, and I will be sharing mine in the next one.
Yeah, so I'm Liz. I grew up in Indiana on a farm for most of my life, and both Erin and I actually met in college at a service academy, and we were each other's first roommates. So it's so full circle that we are doing ministry together, and we are both active duty military officers, and our husbands are in the military as well. And we also both do ministry for Planting Roots. So it's a nonprofit for military wives and women, and we run the podcast over there as well.
Yeah, recently on the Deeply Rooted podcast, we did a series where we shared just what was happening in our lives and what we were learning through God's Word, and we did it weekly. And during that time, we discovered that we both kind of had a deep passion for women's ministry and a shared understanding of the lessons that we were both learning in this season of transition from work life to realizing the importance of staying home and serving our husbands and future and current children. And so we are moving to a more formal monthly format over there, but we wanted to continue the casual, meaningful conversations here on Mind Your Mission.
So as far as my story goes, I was raised in a Christian home, and by the age of 7, I had accepted Jesus as my Savior. But for a long time, I didn't truly know God in a way that impacted my life. My early years in the faith were more about head knowledge and going to church rather than heart knowledge and having an actual relationship with Jesus. I was living life like I didn't fully trust God to guide my decisions. In high school, I fell into that trap that a lot of people fall into of wanting to be popular and accepted by others. So this led me to make choices that brought me down a path of bitterness and anger and distance from the values that my parents instilled in me growing up. And the turning point in my life came junior year of high school. So I did track since middle school, and for some reason junior year, people convinced me to join the cross-country team, which is a God thing because that's where I met a group of girls who are still some of my best friends to this day. And they were women who loved Jesus and lived for him. And when I hung out with them, I just got to see Jesus in a new light. I hadn't ever seen people my age pursuing Christ. In my head, it was always something that I would do later, but they were doing it now, and I just had so much fun with them. And we did things that served the Lord. Like, we weren't partying, we weren't doing any of that, but I had so much more fun being with them and spending time with them. Like, I had never laughed as much as I've laughed when I hang out with them. And so I think God brought them in my life so that I could see him in a new way and be encouraged to develop a relationship with them. And that really just shows how much God uses relationships in our lives to bring us closer to Christ. And that's something Erin's going to talk about as well. But it really just shows the sovereignty of God in our lives, and that if he wants you, he can get you. And a lot of times I feel like that's through relationships. Most people that I've talked to that have come to Christ, it's been through other Christians and relationships with them. So it's just a reminder to always be alert and always be looking for the person that God is leading you to. But it was during this time when I met these girls that I truly gave my life to Christ and I began to live out my faith. So this is when I started reading the Bible daily. I started praying. I got involved in a young women's small group at a church, and I felt like I was really seeking God for the first time. I didn't know what it looked like before this, and finally everything had clicked for me. And it was through this that I felt a calling that was more about serving others and living for God rather than seeking personal popularity and worldly success. So that season of spiritual growth was actually the one that led me to go to a service academy. And when I look back at my story, it is totally a God thing because I wasn't thinking about a military career at all. I didn't have any family in the military. That had never crossed my mind. The biggest reason that I did apply for a service academy is because I'd applied to all these schools in Indiana, but I just wanted to get out of Indiana. And the only way to be able to afford out-of-state tuition was to go to a service academy. And through a lot of prayer and reflection, I just felt called there, to say the least. I just felt like this is where the Lord was calling me, and I kind of put it in his hands. I was like, Lord, if this is where you want me to go, like, allow me to get in and open the doors for that. But if not, just allow me to not get in, and I'll go to a school in Indiana if that's what you have for me. And so he answered, because somehow, by the will of God, I got in. And then I found myself starting a new chapter, one that I had never planned for. And I had no idea what God had in store for me there. But I think part of the reason he placed me there was to shape my heart for what I feel called to do in women's ministry with Aaron. And since graduating from the academy, I loved my time there. I loved the people there. It was a really unique experience, but I feel like God has really changed my life since graduation. When I had graduated, I was very career driven. I was afraid that if I had children or became a stay-at-home mom, it would ruin all my professional success and everything that I'd worked for in high school and in college. I felt like I had to prove myself and be some sort of boss girl, and that I had to have it all together. But as I grew in my faith, and especially after getting married to my wonderful husband who I met in school, I really began to realize that my true calling wasn't about climbing the career military ladder. So I have to give a shout out to my husband, because he has been a huge encouragement to me in this journey. He has really shown me and encouraged me to embrace my femininity and to lean into God's design for family and motherhood. For our first year of marriage, we would get into different arguments because I wanted to have a career, but he had a mom who stayed at home, and he saw the value in that and saw how it shaped him and his siblings' lives. And his siblings are all so close. They all love Jesus, and I really want our family to be like theirs. So I had to essentially pray for God to change my heart. I knew that's where I wanted to be. I wanted my family to look like that. But my head was in that place, but my heart was in another, where I just wanted to have a career, have money, and all of that stuff. That's like where my head was at. So I really had to pray that the Lord would change my heart and give me a desire to be a mother and have children, because I didn't really have it at this time. I knew I was going to have kids, but it really wasn't a desire in my heart. But the Lord completely changed that. I feel like it was probably about like 6 months ago is when it was kind of gradual changing. God was putting people in my life that were stay-at-home moms who I got to learn from. And eventually, once we moved to Virginia, I feel like that's when I was like, oh yeah, like I want to get out of the military. I want to be at home more and be able to support my family in the home. And so if you're struggling with it, just pray to God, because it was just crazy how he changed my heart, because I went from one complete extreme to the other. And when I look back to pre-Christian me, the beginning of high school, I didn't even want kids. I was like, I'm not having kids. I just want a career. The Lord has completely changed me, if you can't tell. And all this brings to mind a quote that I read from C.S. Lewis. And when I read this, everything sort of clicked for me. And it basically sums up this whole transformation that I've experienced. And it's: the homemaker has the ultimate career. All other careers exist for one purpose, and that is to support the ultimate career. The homemaker's work is the one for which all other work exists. And when I read that, everything sort of clicked for me. The calling to build a home and bring up children and create a family isn't a lesser role, which is what I had thought before in high school. It's a high and divine calling, and it's where everything else in life finds its purpose. And that's the shift that I've experienced in my own heart. And I had to kind of understand that my path isn't about stepping back from success, but it's about stepping into the fullness of God's plan for my life. And something that I've been frustrated with since I have decided that this is the path I want to take is I don't get encouragement from a lot of people, definitely in the military, and just people in my life. When I tell them this, they're like, but why would you throw away all your years of education? And why would you throw away the money and to be a mom? And it just gets frustrating because a lot of people don't see the value in motherhood. And we're not saying you have to give up your whole career. That's not what we're saying. We're just telling our stories and where we're at with this. And we wanted to bring you along in the journey as we sort of figure this out. But it's a hard place to be in the workforce when you have a desire to do something and you don't feel supported from your supervisors and your coworkers. And one of the biggest things I always hear is, well, what about the money? But while I'm on this earth, I want to invest in the things that I can bring with me to heaven, which is my family. There's the cars you buy, the house you have, like you're not bringing any of that to heaven. And so I want to invest in my family and my future children, God willing. And so that's kind of when things started to shift in my head. I really had to lay down the love of money. I feel like that was one of the biggest things. And in scripture, it talks about how the love of money is the root of evil, and specifically the love of money, not necessarily money itself, but the love and obsession with it. And I love the verse in Matthew 6:24. When I was reading this and meditating on this, I feel like it also helped me sort of make that shift from career-minded to family-minded. But it says, no one can serve two masters, for either will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And so in my mind, I was serving money. I wanted to have the dual income and build this life for ourselves. But then I had to realize that I cannot serve God and money. It's one or the other. Mm-hmm. And for me, this looked like laying down my career, because if that was the main reason why I wanted a career was to have money, that's not the right reasons to have a career. That is selfish ambition. And there are different jobs where maybe you feel called to it because of this reason, and that's awesome. But for me, in the military specifically, it was just for money and to have dual income. And so once I kind of got over the love of money, I feel like that helped me a lot as well decide to make this decision, because truly investing in our families is not going to return void. It's going to be so much more beneficial than me just working to get a paycheck. But this lack of encouragement that I felt in the workforce was one of the big reasons that I wanted to start this podcast with Erin. And it's part of the vision for this podcast, because we really wanted to create a space where we could encourage you wherever you're at in your journey to lean into your purpose as women and to follow the unique calling that God has for your life.
The other day I was talking to a former Air Force officer, and she had gotten out at 5 and become just a stay-at-home mom. And so when I told her what I wanted to do with my career, because that's a typical question that you get, what is your career? What are your career goals? And I told her, she said, wow, I wish that someone had given me permission to do that. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, she got out at 5 and she made that choice, but no one had given her permission to do that. She felt like she was going against the grain to make that decision. And what she said after that is that we chose the path that we did. So we chose to go to college and choose the career that we did so that we would have a choice. And that really hit me deep, because I'm proud of the path that we chose. We chose it for a reason, to set ourselves up for success financially and with opportunities. But we also chose it so that we would have freedom to make a decision to pivot. And so Liz is exactly right. We just want to encourage you, whether you're already a stay-at-home mom, whether you're somewhere in the corporate ladder, I don't know where you are, but we just want to encourage you to really evaluate whether the feeling on your heart is just guilt from the world, which is not something that you want to follow, or if it's true conviction from the Lord. And for me, that transition began when I became a mom. In our next episode, I'll share how getting pregnant at a time that I hadn't planned ended up being one of the most unexpected and beautiful parts of fulfilling His greater purpose for my life.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that conversation. And when you were talking about telling that other woman that you wanted to get out and be a stay-at-home mom, and she encouraged you in that, I've had one person encourage me in it at work, and he basically told me, when I told him my career goals were to be a stay-at-home mom, because this is my last job before I transition, he encouraged me in that. And he was like, my mom stayed at home with me, and I appreciated it so much. And I think there needs to be more encouragement for women in the military to get out, because there's so much efforts on retention and staying in and keeping a career and ways to do that and have a family. But he was like, there's not really a space for encouraging women who want to get out. And so that's part of our heart, to help other women navigate their faith and their calling and their roles in and outside the home with confidence. So whether you're in the military, or you're a mom, or you're in the corporate world, in ministry, or just figuring out where God is calling you next, we want to walk alongside you and remind you that living for God's glory in whatever season you're in is the most fulfilling way to live.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for tuning in to our first official episode. You can find all of our socials linked below, And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more great video content coming your way. With that, I'm Erin.
And I'm Liz.
Helping you mind your mission.